Hello and welcome, guys, to a video talking about the gear-based matchmaking and skill-based matchmaking and ARC Raiders that they recently talked about in their Discord. They put up a post. I'll put it on the screen here for you as well, talking about the potential of using gear-based matchmaking or skill-based matchmaking. So today we're going to talk a little bit about why skill-based matchmaking and or gear-based matchmaking wouldn't actually work for ARC Raiders. I'm also going to be joined by my buddy, who I'll be jumping into Discord with in just a second. He's going to kind of just be there to talk it out with me. So if you have a different opinion or a different thought, or you think it would work skill-based or gear-based matchmaking, I would be very interested in hearing you guys' thoughts. But to start it off on kind of a flat, even ground for everybody, I'm actually going to be starting and going down kind of a list of my thoughts and why I think like skill-based matchmaking or gear-based matchmaking actually won't work, and that the way that they have it right now is probably their best bet. So with that, we'll go hop into Discord here. Mezzi is here with me. We're going to talk about, like I was saying before, skill-based and gear-based matchmaking, and at least of my opinion, Mezzi might have a different opinion all around, but I think we kind of agreed that both skill-based and gear-based matchmaking probably won't work for this game. I don't know if you have changed your opinion or not.
No, I think it's still going to be about the same. There's a couple things that benefit each, but for a game like Ark, it just doesn't really make sense to me.
I agree. So I figured I'd start it off with talking about kind of, so that way everybody's on the same page here, where skill-based matchmaking derives from, and it's the ELO system that was for chess. So if anybody is unaware, your standard system for most competitive games is based off of the ELO system, which is a system that was created by a Hungarian-American physics professor for chess. It was to provide an accurate statistics-based method for ranking chess players, and it was adopted in the U.S. around like the 1960s or something. Fundamentally, at a super basic level, but this is pretty much how it works. So I'm going to give you guys an example here. There's player A versus player B. They're both at 1,000 points, or whatever you want to call it. I think like what Valorant calls it, RR, right? League of Legends is RP, I think, or whatever, and Siege is like, what is Siege calls theirs now? I can't remember. Is it also ELO? I thought it was something else.
I think it's just ELO.
I think it's just
really like a name to it. You just kind of got a number and a rank.
Yeah. So, look, it can be called any amount of things, but the system that it uses is ELO. But anyway, so player A, player B have 1,000 points. If player A beats player B, they gain 100 points, putting player A at 1,100 points, player B at 900 points. Pretty standard, pretty simple, right? In that same regard, if player B was to beat player A having 900 points and player A having 1,100, player B would then gain 200 points, putting them back above player A, because player B having less ELO is assumed that by the system standards, they would lose, right? So instead of just gaining 100, you're going to gain 200. So they actually would trade places with player A having 900 and player B having 1,100. To that same idea, if player B having 1,100 beats player A again, they actually would not gain 100 points or 200 points. They probably would gain like 50 points. So then they'd be at 1,150 points, while player A is at 850 points. The reason for that being is, since they're already ahead, the system assumes that they're going to win, therefore they get less rewards for winning. Now, to that fundamental understanding, hopefully everybody understands those numbers and kind of how that works. Where it becomes a problem in most, I'd say, modern games today, I think we've all experienced this. I know Mezzi and I definitely have when queuing. When you turn those numbers from individual one-on-ones, which is why it works for chess, into 5 versus 5s, which I think is most competitive games now, I think are about 5v5s. You start averaging numbers, right? Everybody's got a different number. You average it together to try to get a relatively common number as a team versus a relatively common number against another team. The problem is most teams will suffer in that regard, because if you have a super high level player and a super low level player playing together, you really limit the higher level players from being able to truly work with their team, because you start to lose a fundamental cohesion that comes with experience or skill being expressed in most games when you have high level versus low level players being paired together against average level players. And I think that's where you get your first issues with. I think that everybody watching this video, Mezzi and myself included, have experienced that where you are in a 5v5. I remember playing Marvel Rivals. You're playing and you're like, dude, my tank is just awful. Like, he doesn't get the concept of just keeping his shield up or keeping pressure up, or my healers just can't heal. And that's where your weak link becomes a problem. Even though your teams are equal in average elo, there's a skill expression difference at an individual level that can absolutely be taken advantage of by better players and is taken advantage of by better players. I think League of Legends shows that pretty well with the challenger players doing the the unranked to masters or whatever that they do, where you're like, man, they make laning look so easy against their opponents. They just run them down. And then you go to your game and I'm like, I don't understand why I can't do this. And it's like, because your individual level of skill does not recognize the same moments of opportunity that a higher level player of skill does have. So thus, skill-based matchmaking becomes a major problem when you start taking it outside of a 1 versus 1 kind of group mentality, or 1 versus 1 mentality into a group mentality as a whole. At least that's my opinion of it, and why I think skill-based matchmaking is such a problem. Also, why I wouldn't think it would work for a game like Arc Raiders, because none of Arc Raiders is 1 versus 1, and trying to make an entire lobby of people of equal elo, I feel like would be a problem, especially if they're queuing in solos. I mean, what do you think? You think it would work for solos, but not for groups, maybe?
I don't, because the thing is, with skill-based matchmaking, you kind of get into the territory of what Warzone deals with, where you're the average working person. You just got off of a 9-hour shift. You come home, you finally get on the game, and you just want to have some fun. You start playing well, and maybe not your first game, but your second game on, you wipe a lobby. And all of a sudden, you get placed into a lobby there and after with nothing but 13-year-olds who play all day.
Adderall.
Yeah, Adderall kids who are just cracked out of their mind. They've got a quarter of a second reaction time. Or you get placed into lobbies with streamers who this is their job. They are into strategy, and they are so just in tune with the game that it doesn't really matter what you do. You're going to get outshot, you're going to get out strategied, and no matter what you do, it's just not fun at that point. And I think that's what really ruins skill-based matchmaking, is because it's not like a gradual increase of skill. It's you're either you're in the pits, or you're at the top of the mountain playing King of the Hill.
Yeah, I agree.
That's how I feel about skill-based matchmaking.
I agree with that pretty much entirely. Actually, I like that you brought up the Warzone thing, because I remember, I don't know if you remember, but we had somebody show us Warzone stuff on the back end. We had I knew somebody that worked for Call of Duty at the time, and they showed us the back end of the matchmaking for Warzone itself as a battle royale, which I know battle royale is slightly different than what we're talking about here with Arc, but relevant to the skill-based matchmaking conversation, the topic here, which is Warzone tracked your stats, which is the next part of skill-based matchmaking that I want to talk about, actually. But it tracked your stats, your how many Warzone matches did you win? What was your KD by the end of the Warzone matches? Did you revive players? Were you revived? All that kind of stuff they tracked. And based on your stats, they would pair you with other people. For those of you who are maybe a little bit more in tune with the matchmaking of Call of Duty, that was kind of how they had their shadow banning happen, where if your stats were really high, you ended up getting paired with more cheaters because your stats were closer to matching to a cheater's stats than the average player stats. And I know that because my friend at the time who was working for Call of Duty could put us in those lobbies. They could hand choose us and choose what queue they put us in based on our stuff. They could see all of our stats and they could put us there. And they put us into a lobby that had all developers and moderators. And then they put us in one lobby with all cheaters and put us with God mode to face the cheaters. So it was confirmed cheaters. So we got to experience both sides of it. But they do that. But the problem then becomes you get somebody that's like a streamer. And like you just said, streamers play this, it's all day. It's their job. But they're really good. right? So their stats are really high, which is why you hear so many streamers constantly complain about cheaters in their lobbies and all that stuff like that. And the only way to combat that is the next part of this that I wanted to talk about for skill-based matchmaking, which is skill-based matchmaking in a game like Arc Raiders, where it is kind of an open world. You can kind of choose wherever you want to go. You're not forced to go somewhere via like a battle royale circle or something like that. Your skill as a player becomes kind of irrelevant, because if a really good player decides that they don't want to go to the PvP, center of the map and fight, and they want to go on the outside of the map, you might very well run across that player. But your skill-based matchmaking at that point won't matter, right? Because the game can't predict that PvP player who usually goes to the center of the map deciding not to go that raid. And so we'll talk about Tarkov. Tarkov, I think a lot of people are aware of. It's kind of the main counterpoint to Arc Raiders. Tarkov tracks your stats. It tracks your survives. It tracks your raids completed. It tracks your AFKs, your raids lost that you died in, your KD ratio, how much money you've made, all that kinds of stuff. And they use that stats to try to find cheaters. I think when it first came out, everybody was really excited. We're like, oh yeah, we're going to see, cheaters are going to have a 64 KD. Cheaters got smart. Cheaters started saying, okay, we just won't kill everybody then. So instead, they only fought people they had to fight. And cheaters started running into lobbies and dying to lower their KD ratios. Then it became really hard to find cheaters. If you had a skill-based matchmaking system that tracked all those stats, players as a whole, PvP players, would learn to abuse that. And I know that people do that because it happens in Call of Duty. People load into lobbies, run into people, die, lower their KD, lower their survival rates to go down to easier lobbies so that they can farm Timmies for clips for Call of Duty. That's why it's really hard for me to trust a lot of like Call of Duty people, because I'm like, you can very easily throw your stats, and it's based off of like your last like 10 like Warzone matches or whatever. So I'm like, if it's that easy to abuse in a game like Arc Raiders, it would be so easy. Just load in a free loadout, you run in, go die, leave. Load into a new raid, go and die, leave, and then you get paired with a bunch of Timmies if it has skill-based matchmaking in that regard. So that's where I stand on that. I just don't think skill-based matchmaking in any sense of it for a game like Arc Raiders, where it is an extraction shooter, but that arguably your level of success is your own choice. Like for a PvP player like me, my version of successful raid is killing a bunch of people and leaving with a bunch of loot. But I have heard of people arguing that a successful raid for them is everybody leaving with a lot of loot. I'm like, if that's how you want to choose your success, that's how you can choose your success. So how does the system of skill-based matchmaking, how do you think they're going to label a successful raid? Is it just extracting? Because again, you can abuse that by just not extracting. And then you get paired with people who don't extract very much, and then you go in all excited because you're like, cool, I've lost 10 raids in a row. My survival rate's 10%? And then I get paired against players who are awful at the game and are brand new, and then I just go stomp a bunch of Timmies and take all their loot. So I think skill-based matchmaking in that regard, not a good choice for Arc Raiders. But if anybody has a counterpoint, please put it in the comments. Let me know why you think it would work. I cannot see it working. So let's see. The next topic was gear-based matchmaking. Do you want to start this off with gear-based matchmaking and why you feel gear-based matchmaking won't work?
Yeah, I think we both have the same opinion about this because we've played a lot of Dark and Darker, and that's kind of the primary gear-based matchmaking use in current gaming. You've got your tiers of your 0 to 24. We'll go back to when it was enjoyable. You've got your 0 to 24, which is like base gear. You're not putting in anything that you could have found or bought, and it's just what's given to you for your start. That I feel like is the most balanced because everybody's on the same page. You can't really abuse that necessarily. You might get a necklace or a ring, but that's really all you can add. You've got your 25 to, I think it was 124, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Which is like you can have a few pieces of gear, nothing crazy, but enough that you feel like you're not just gonna get one shot. You can take a couple hits, you can deal some damage, you're kind of going in and out of combat without necessarily it just being like there and done. Like once you get into high roller, 250 plus, that kind of thing, where every single gear component is just stacked.
Yeah.
And the people who are really succeeding that are either A, great at PvP, great at parrying, great at just dodging stuff, or they're BIS in every category. And that's just hard to beat. But
Yeah.
the thing with that in Arc is, like you said, we don't have actual damage increases. It's utility based when you upgrade your guns. Like when you go from tier 1 to tier 2, you might not even get like a magazine increase. You might just get like a slightly faster reload. Or when you go from like 2 to 3 and 4, then you start getting faster reload, faster ADS speed, um, faster kind of round cycling so that it doesn't take as long between shots. And while that doesn't necessarily make people get one shot right away, it's not as intuitive. I think that gear-based matchmaking has its place, but for a game like Ark where it's not increasing your damage, it's not really increasing stats other than that weapon and
Right.
like how it's used, it just doesn't really make sense to me.
I completely agree. I think some people wanted gear based matchmaking, but to me I think it doesn't make sense for gear based matchmaking more so than skill based matchmaking even. To have a place in Arc because Arc as itself, like you said, it is built as its core, meant for an even playing field regardless of gear type. And I think the easiest example of that is, like you said, was weapons. When they increase in levels, they don't increase in damage. Like what is it? The Rattler 1 had 10 rounds, but the Rattler like 3 had like 18 rounds. Like it increases by 4 each time it was a tier higher, which means that like a good player can still get a shield break and potentially a down with 10 rounds, right? Like playing around corners, playing cover well, 10 rounds is not going to be the end of the world. It's going to make them slow down a little bit versus 18 rounds, but a bad player with 18 rounds versus a good player with 10 rounds, the good player is still going to win because those 8 extra rounds are not going to be the end of the world for a good player playing his positioning well. But having, if it meant 18 rounds and each bullet did 10 more damage, then sure, like that to me has a much better chance to just stat check a good player. So that's why I'm like, I just don't think gear-based matchmaking has any place in Arc Raiders as a whole because from what I can tell, and maybe those of you in the comments can correct us because we only played the Service Slam, so we didn't really get to see like a lot of higher level weapons. We saw grays and greens. I think we picked up like the Osprey, which was blue, but
Yeah, there was a couple blues. I think Nelly got a pink at one point.
I did find a Tempest, but it was broken, so I didn't get to use it. So I know that there's like different rarities of guns, and those obviously I assume deal more damage, but they were a different type of weapon, like altogether. Like it wasn't like there was a purple Rattler versus a gray Rattler. It was like if it's a Rattler, it's gonna be gray. Um, I think even the El Toro shotgun was green. Um, I know you found the level 2 workbench version. I found the level 1, but I think they were still both greens, right?
I think one of them was gray. The one that you could craft with the level 1 workbench, I'm pretty positive was gray. Same thing with the anvil blueprint that I found.
Okay. So maybe there's a damage difference there and like a rarity of weapons. And if maybe somebody in the comments can tell us that, like if rarity of a weapon being gray or green or blue, if it goes higher, maybe there's a damage difference there. And I guess like then you could argue maybe gear-based matchmaking starts to make a bit more sense. But from what we could tell from the Server Slam, there was no damage increase. It was utility increases. Magazines being bigger, reload speeds being faster, ADS speeds being better, less spread in your like firing, faster fire rates, like for shotguns and stuff. Like it was all utility based stats that increased per level rather than damage. So without the damage, I didn't see any damage increases. I'm going to say gear-based matchmaking makes no sense in that regard, especially because even green and blue shields, while you have more shields, it's just a damage reduction. It's not a like damage absorption. So it still means that even as a gray kit, and we have 0 to hero runs on my channel already to watch those, but we have plenty where start in with the free loadout, kill guys with green or blues, and then leave. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean just because I have a blue shield on, I can't die to a gray gear person. So I think gear-based matchmaking at that point just doesn't make sense. Plus, I think the biggest part of gear-based matchmaking that I don't like if you were to do that is you really lose out on the feeling of if you're a lower tier person and you're going in to make money, the potential of killing a juicer and leaving with all of their gear, you lose that feeling. And that's such a good feeling that, like, arguably that feeling is probably what made Tarkov so successful, was like, you know that you could go in with just a Mosin or, what's the other one? SKS, and one tap a juicer and get all of his gear. And that was always a potential that you had going into a raid. And it's kind of the same for Arc, I think. If you've got a Pharaoh, you can still, maybe not one tap somebody, but you can kind of 2 to 3 tap somebody for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really important feeling to a game of success that you don't really want to take away from the player base, especially because it rewards people who play their weapon, their positioning well, and it rewards people who are learning the game and increasing their skill level. If you take that away, you kind of lose your core desire to play the game, because then it becomes just a looting game, which I'm going to argue, I think that's what Tarkov is now, because you either die in one shot and you're a Chad with 10 million in your stash and you don't really care and you go and re-loot up, or you're a rat because you die in one tap, so instead you bring in shit gear and you're just trying to get out with anything you can. And I think Arc Raider brings a nice middle ground where it's like, I can go in with some stuff. I'm not afraid of losing things because I can gear back up, but I can find a lot of stuff as well, which is very fun. So at least that's my opinion of it. I had something else that I was going to say about gear-based matchmaking, but I can't remember what it was now. So,
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me is, I'll let you go first. I've got mine written down.
Okay. I was going to say, actually, the other part of gear-based matchmaking that I think is a problem is that people learn. I'm actually going to bring up a game that we were going to talk about later, Arena Breakout. You learn what gear you can wear to keep you as a maxed out version of the lowest lobby you can be in, so that you can either stomp on Timmy's and make a bunch of money and nobody can kill you, or that at best, my cat's sitting down my lap, sorry. Or at best that if you go in with maxed gear and you can stay in the lowest lobby, that somebody is only going to be equal to you, but they're never going to stat check you in gear. That's my other problem with gear-based matchmaking.
Yeah, mine was going to be kind of about the same thing. It's, instead of kind of making each raid unique and fun and rewarding, it kind of separates it into the different lobbies, which is reducing your player count and making it just a little bit more spread out. It's not as rewarding when you get a kill on somebody because they don't really have much better stuff than you do, right? And with Arena Breakout, we found that the limit was about 200,000. If your kit was worth more than 200,000, you got placed in a higher tier lobby. But if you were to keep it at like 199 even, you got placed with everybody from the default free kit up to where you were, basically. Yep. And you could just stomp people because then you've got a face mask, you've got a higher tier armor, you've got a bigger backpack so that you can take all of their stuff out. And I don't know, to me that wasn't as fun because you're not even getting challenged at that point.
I agree. Yeah, because I mean, you're right. It becomes entirely a run for PvP centric players to go and stomp Timmy's out. And the problem with Arc Raiders, this is where I think a lot of people are going to get upset, possibly. Arc Raiders is the arcade version of an extraction shooter. I know a lot of people I've been hearing it a lot of places, people saying it's a new genre, it's a new thing. It's not a new genre. It is an extraction shooter with crafting facets to it, very similar to Tarkov, without the over realism that Tarkov has, it is like it's the Call of Duty of extraction shooters is how I view this, right? It's meant for a casual player base. It's meant for the people who come home from a 9 to 5 to jump on. They don't have to spend 8 hours grinding together money to buy a kit to get one tapped. You aren't going to get one tapped in this game, as far as I can tell. Maybe at like pink and legendary weapons, maybe you could potentially one tap a gray gear guy. In which case I'd be like, like I guess. But it seems like for the most part, you kind of avoid all the BS things that kind of ruin an experience for a player. You always kind of have a fighting chance if you play it right. Anyway, that's my thoughts there on that though. So
Yeah, I agree.
cool. The last couple of things that we want to talk about then is with all of those things in mind for everybody that has watched along with us this far, how we think skill-based matchmaking and gear-based matchmaking is not going to work for the game. The question becomes, well, what do you think they should do? I think they should do exactly what they have been doing. I think the lobbies need to be random, with the exception of I think they definitely want to keep solos as solos and duos as duos trios. I think that's the best option that they have, because solo players, if they're paired against solos and duos, solo players will almost always tend to avoid fights, or altogether will just like not trust each other, and you'll have heavy PvP. I think the solo lobby as is probably your greatest option if you're a diplomacy runner. If you enjoy diplomacy and trying to talk to people, that's probably your best place to go, because duos and trios is more like I want action, I want to fight. So I think that's the right idea that they have. I don't think switching that at all would be of assistance. The only argument that you could make to that I'm like, to your point earlier, being like not trying to split up the player base too much, is solos and duos and trios, meaning the duos could go to either queue depending on the player base as a whole. Because for those of you who are unaware or have not played Dark and Darker, it's another game that's kind of like a dungeon crawler, like Dungeons and Dragons style type thing. Horrible execution of ideas. I'm going to be honest with you. Great game idea, horrible execution. They had the same idea of like 0 to 24, 124 to like 24 to 124, and then 124 plus lobbies. But then they had a normals and a high roller lobby, which is like extra loot versus normal loot, which meant that there was 6 queues as a whole. Problem with having 6 different queues is that you split your player base between 6 queues, which means queue times become a lot longer. One of the things about Arc Raiders that they have going for them is that they have a large player base, so they could afford to split them up a little bit. But arguably, another fun part of our Arc Raiders is that it's super fast queue time. And that's simply because they have a lot of players, and they only have 2 separate queues. Well, they have 2 separate queues in terms of amount of players, but they have 5 maps already, which means they already have, 10, right? 5 times 2, right? Because it's 2 per map, 5 maps. So they have 10 queues, technically speaking, to split their entire player base among. So they're already going to have to deal with that.
To go back to your Dark and Darker, it's not just 6 queues, because there's 3 maps, and each of those maps has solos, duos, and trios.
Yeah, you're right.
So you're technically sitting at...
They were
bad at math, but
they were at
if we were talking one map, that's 18 queues.
Yes, yeah, you're right. There was, because it was Goblin Caves, Ruins, and the Ice map, and then they had a normals and high roller version of all 3 of those maps. So yeah, you're right. They had like 50-something queues altogether.
Way too many queues. Way too many.
So yes.
So I think that's the downside to gear-based matchmaking and the splitting up solos with solos, duos with duos, and trios with trios. I think that was what made Arc really fun in this latest playtest, is me and you could go in as a duo, we'd encounter duos and we'd encounter trios, but we could take on those trios because we work together well, and it's not just like, oh, because they outnumber you, you're gonna lose every time.
Yeah.
If you play it right, you can win those fights without a problem.
Yep, I agree. And that was good, yeah. So to those of you who are like, as a duo, we struggled to kill trios, that's going to be the case, right? Numbers almost always have an advantage over quality, but that being said, quality played right can beat numbers, especially in a small amount like duos versus trios. Like it's one person. You really only got to catch one person lacking, and you can kind of even out the playing field a little bit, especially if you play around each other very well. Again, we have some raids on my channel already that were duos, and we ran into 3-man squads, so that works well.
And wiped them.
And wiped them, yes, and we did wipe them. That is true. So,
and like that's what's fun is you can still compete as a duo against trios. If you don't want to, you don't necessarily have to take those fights. There obviously is going to be points where you get snuck up on while you're looting, or you get ambushed by a team that saw you before you saw them, and you can't really get out of that. It just is what it is, but you can change up how you actually fight once you're in that scenario, right? Like
yep.
you're not forced into immediately taking every fight. Like you can back off, you can take cover, you can throw down a smoke grenade to give you enough time to find a different spot to take this fight from.
Yeah, I have to say, I actually was really impressed with the utility in our graders. I feel like a lot of games don't do like smoke grenades or other grenades very well. Like they're either overpowered or they're just not strong enough. I think our graders actually did a pretty good job of balancing that. I don't feel like nades were. I felt like nades were almost necessary to bring to every fight, but I never felt like a fight for me was determined by a nade. It was more like nades were like perfectly balanced to be zoning / damaging if you got yourself stuck in a corner, but at the same time, it wasn't like I think Arena Breakout does this, and I'll say Tarkov does this, where nades are like, you hear a nade, you're like, I'm fucking dead. That's it.
Yeah.
So I have to give props to Arc Raiders on that one. I think they balance those really well. And again, it's probably because maybe it is a third-person game. You kind of see the grenades coming, and you're like, oh, throwing a grenades. I think it's partially also due to the fuse timer and the explosion radius that they have balanced out. I think they're done really well. Kind of get enough time to like do a dodge roll away, take a little less damage or no damage depending on your positioning, but all in all, really well done. I do want to go.
The only thing I would like to change about those grenades, sorry to interrupt,
You're good.
is let me carry more than 3 for God's sake. And let me. I think the other part that needs to change is how quickly you can throw grenades. Because right now you can just you got a stack of 3. It's like boom, 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 and then if they're sitting on top of that, that's gonna down them. If there's 3 grenades going off at their feet.
If you're talking about the light grenades, like the impact grenades,
the impacts didn't do as much damage, which I'm okay with. But like I was watching your video the other day, you had those
sticky
I can't remember
ones.
what they're called, the sticky ones. Dude,
Yeah.
you can huck those things like no other. It was just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, I
So
cleared
like,
that room
I feel like
with
that
that when
needs
we
to
pushed
slow
in,
down
yeah.
a little bit.
That's fair. I can agree to the rate at which you can throw grenades, because I do think like you shouldn't be able to throw 3 like that one. You're right. It was one of our raids where we ran into that room with that team of 2 that was in there, and one guy was in the corner and one guy had run out. But I had like threw 2 at the guy in the corner and 1 at the guy far, and that guy in the corner was forced to move like all the way into the corner because he couldn't run away from the nades because there was 2 of them. And I agree entirely with that. That being said, I think a stack of 3 is probably okay, because then it becomes like a Tarkov issue, or like when Labs was first introduced, where everybody was just like vests full of grenades, and it was like, oh, here I am with like 300 grenades, and I'm just gonna fucking throw around everywhere. So I'm like, I don't know if I went more than a stack of 3, because you have 4 slots on a green looting thing, right? You have 4 slots to bring meds, a nade, and maybe another nade, unless you bring in like 3 meds and a nade. So I think with higher gear, you probably are going to get more slots. So
yeah, and I mean with us, it was always like shield recharger, bandages, grenade slot, flute.
and then flute, yes, yeah. Like I'm just saying, my request to Arc Raiders, if anybody from Mimbark watches this, please give me a special slot just for the flute. Nothing else can go there but flutes, and let me just have that. So I do want to go back actually, and I want to talk about a topic that was we brought up a little bit earlier, or that I brought up a little bit earlier. One that I think a lot of people might have some issues with, but calling Arc Raiders as it is, I think it's an arcadey version of a extraction shooter. And to prove that point, I wanted to bring up that I think it's going to be the first successful version of an arcadey shooter. I know we had talked a little bit about it, and other games that are extraction shooters that were unsuccessful, and I believe they were unsuccessful because, well, some of them were unsuccessful, not all of them. Some of them were unsuccessful because instead of taking the arcadey route that Arc Raiders is taking, I think they're either still focused on or very close to trying to take on Escape from Tarkov, which is obviously Arc Raiders' biggest contender for the genre. So a couple of examples that we had talked about was the closest to arcadey versions of this game were Exoborn. If anybody's familiar with Exoborn, we brought that one up. That's probably the next arguably closest version of an arcadey extractor. Cycle Frontier, which is one that had failed. The other options were like, I think Marauders. I've heard Marauders brought up once or twice, and you brought it up actually before the recording of this. Marauders, I agreed, was kind of arcadey, but it was still in the realm of trying to be somewhat realistic. And I think that's a big reason why it didn't take off, because I don't think any game in the extraction shooter world that wants to compete in it can go for the realism take, because I think Escape from Tarkov is just way too cemented into what it is.
Yeah, they've locked in that slot, and it's insta-locked, perma-locked. I don't think anybody is really going to replace that until Nikita kills his game.
That's true. Which he is in that, moving in that direction. You know, he is moving in that direction of killing off Escape from Tarkov. So there might be a chance very soon here that we see a new realism extraction shooter take over. So there's a possibility. But let's see, other genres of extraction shooters so that people understand. By the way, Arc Raiders is an extraction shooter. It is not an adventure game. It is not a. I wouldn't even really call it a survival game. It doesn't really have any survival elements other than like survive the raid. But that's an extraction shooter. That's what an extraction shooter is survive the raid with making either loot or gear and coming out of it. So the other options you have would be something like Deep Rock Galactic you brought up. Hunt Showdown is arguably one of the only other major ones I think that has stood its ground. It's not competing for realism, it's competing for fantasy, and I don't think anybody has tried to fight Hunt Showdown for a fantasy extraction shooter. We have Arena Breakout, which is the Tarkov equivalent, but the closest thing that I think Arc Raiders has for competition besides Exoborn that's currently up and running. Arena Breakout is a mobile game that was ported over to PC. It's definitely arcadey. So anybody that hasn't tried Arena Breakout, it is like a much easier version of Tarkov. It's not as overly realistic. That being said, it still keeps a lot of the realism parts of it, where it's got like the ammo types that are really strong against certain types of armor, all that kinds of stuff, but it doesn't feel as overly realistic as Tarkov. It doesn't take you 12 hours to make money in that game. What else do we have? Oh, Forever Winter. I don't know if anybody's heard of Forever Winter is in there. Forever Winter was not... I argued that I'm not sure if I would consider it an extraction shooter. You brought it up. I think...
It's listed as an extraction shooter on Google. That's why I bring it up.
That's fair. That's fair. It's listed as an extraction shooter. I don't know if I would call it an extraction shooter. And I say that because for those who are Arc Raiders that want PvE specifically, I think your closest option to, I mean, this is like arguably a great replacement if you want a PvE only version of robots versus people, is Forever Winter. Forever Winter is mostly controlled by AI. Now look, don't get me wrong, Forever Winter has got its problems. It's still in development. So that aside, if you're talking about core concept of PvE, robots, and whatever else keeping people off the surface, Forever Winter is your game. It's there. It's got robots, and it's got, I think they're both factions of robots, to be fair, that are fighting, and it's AI controlled, so the maps are crazy, and your job is literally just to get up there, grab materials, and leave. You're really not even trying to fight. So, and it is PvE entirely, and it does allow co-op PvE. So that is an option for those of you who are interested. And the other one that we talked about was Marathon. Oh, Marathon. I don't even know where to start with that one. That's a bad one.
Let's just say it is Bungie's attempt to get their foot in the door with extraction shooters.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I don't think they had the best execution, given their art style was very Roblox esque,
Yeah, was it? They
and
went for
with like the boxy, just
yeah.
cartoonish
I think they said it
looks.
was voxel based, which is very like what was that? It was that survival game that we played. I can't think of the name of it.
I can't either.
You know what I'm talking about, though, right?
I see little glimpses of it, but
I
I
just,
can't name it.
I will look for it. Oh, Enshrouded. There you go. It's a voxel based one, Enshrouded. I think it was supposed to be similar to that, right? Like voxel based being like, fuck, I don't even know how to describe voxel based at this point.
See, I wouldn't even describe those two things in the same universe. It Marathon feels more like a Roblox mod than an actual like
That's fair.
decent game.
That's fair. I can agree with that. The choice of them and their style of game, I was like, yeah, this is not it for sure.
Not to mention the controversies that followed.
Yeah, the art stealing that they had. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some issues with stealing art and not crediting people.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that Bungie's a top tier company to release games, but this was not it. This was a miss.
This was a miss for sure. So, all right, that covers all the stuff that I was planning on talking about. So, TLDR for anybody that wants to skip all the yapping and all that stuff. End results, I think that we kind of agreed on was skill-based matchmaking doesn't really have much of a place in regards to Arc Raiders because there's no efficient way to track skill without it being completely abused. You know, KDs can be abused if you're going to track KDs. Survive the raids can be abused if you're going to do that. Some people you're just going to die some days, and some days you're going to be successful. But if you know that the more success you have, the harder the lobbies are going to get, then you just go in and die. There's too many ways to abuse those rules there. Gear-based matchmaking falls in kind of the same area. I just don't think Arc Raiders is built with the idea of gear-based matchmaking at all, considering that as guns level up, they don't get more damage, which means it's not a game that's supposed to be about stat checking. It's supposed to be about skill or skill expression, to say the least. Same thing as skill-based matchmaking. When people start to learn where the limit is for what's the best gear they can bring in without going into the next tier of lobby, people will start to abuse that as well. So I don't think skill-based or gear-based matchmaking has any place in Arc Raiders. I think if you want the most natural experience for players, stick it as it is. Solos by themselves, duos and trios by themselves. The only exception to that is maybe moving duos as you could potentially get paired with solos and duos or duos and trios, and that's it. Outside of that, I don't think they should touch anything. I think that covers pretty much everything, right? As a TLDR version of all the stuff we talked about. So
yeah.
Cool. So those of you who watched the video all the way through, we appreciate you. If you have a different opinion on why you think skill-based or gear-based matchmaking, or if you have an entirely different idea altogether, we'd love to hear it in the descriptions down below, and we'll give those a look. And if there's enough of you guys that have different points or enough points to talk about, then we'll make a follow-up video and we can talk about it, and we'll argue that all together. So with that, though, guys, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Peace.